Hi, I'm Ayushi and I read 264 books in 2024 and these were all my 5-star reads. This is also my first ever booktube video, which is very exciting. I'm usually over on booktok and bookstagram, but now that booktok is going, I figured it would be a good way to make my way onto booktube. I love yapping about books and I don't like the time constrictions that Instagram has for reels and other videos, so I felt like booktube would be a good place to transition over to. I'll definitely make a separate video that's more of like a get to know me video, but without further ado, let's jump into all of my top reads of 2024. Okay, starting number 10 for romance, and by the way, I did rank these books from 10 to 1, but they were all 5-star reads. It was incredibly hard to rank them. A book being a number 10 does not mean that it was bad in any way. This is just a way for me to categorize probably like how much I enjoyed them and how much I still think about these books, but I still loved every single one of them. Okay, so back to number 10 for romance, we have Butcher and Blackbird by Bryn Weaver. This is a dark rom-com between two serial killers, Sloane, who's known as the Orb Weaver, and Rowan, who's known as the Butcher, and Blackbird is the name that he calls her, hence the name Butcher and Blackbird. It was super fun and not something I typically read, so I really enjoyed this. I have since read the 2 remaining books in the series, Leather and Lark and Scythe and Sparrow, which comes out in February, and I think for me Butcher stays on top. I just love the concept of both of them being serial killers and playing this cat and mouse game. So yeah, had a lot of fun with this one. For number 9 for romance, I don't have a physical copy of because I downloaded it on Stuff Your Kindle Day on a whim, but it's Streams and Schemes by Rebecca Kincaid. This is a book that surprised me so much. The premise of this book is so funny. Basically, our FMC, Valeria, is a cam girl and she lives in this apartment in DC, and her neighbor is this high-profile lawyer named Lander. And they've kind of been in each other's orbit for a year now. Like, they'll enter the elevator at the same time, they'll be exiting their apartment building at the same time, and they're kind of keeping an eye on each other, but neither of them has ever made a move. Valeria is pretty protective of her career and doesn't really want other people to be judging what she does for a living, but once you switch to Lander's POV, you can tell that he is obsessed with her and has been ever since they found out they were neighbors. Now one day they're both in the elevator at the same time, and another guy who lives in their building tries making a move at Valeria, and Lander steps in and protects her. They make their way back to their apartment buildings once the elevator reaches their floor, and while they're there, out of the blue, everyone receives an emergency alert on their phones that a ballistic missile is incoming to their area and is going to make impact in 20 minutes. Now naturally, Valeria is freaking out. She realizes she has like 15 minutes left in her life, and what does she do in those last remaining 15 minutes? She goes next door, knocks on Lander's door. He opens the door and you can tell he is also like freaked out and has this wild look in their eyes. They share one look with each other and decide that they're gonna spend the last 15 minutes of their life making each other's brains out. As they wrap things up, they get an alert on their phones that the previous alert was a mistake and it was accidentally sent out as an error. And that is literally how the book starts. The rest of the writing is so funny and engaging. It's very sex positive. Lander doesn't feature any ounce of toxic masculinity when it comes to Valeria's career. And of course, it is very, very steamy. Now moving on to number 8 for romance, we have The Two of Us by Taylor Torres. I also don't have a physical copy of this book. I think I also read this from my Kindle library, but this is a second chance romance and a really beautiful story of friendship and grief. It follows our main character Mara, who has to return to her small town in Maine after 7 years due to a family emergency, and she's forced to confront with her past and all of the people that she left behind, including her childhood best friend Ambrose King. The title of the book has a deeper meaning that you realize as you read the story. It's also written in a dual timeline, and I definitely recommend it for readers who want to read a romance that will tear out their heart and stomp on it. Coming in at number 7 for romance, we have If I Loved You Less by Amna Qureshi. This was actually my first read of 2024 and I was so happy that it ended up being a 5-star read. That was honestly no surprise to me because I've loved all of Amna's books. If you're an Austen fan, you can recognize from the title that this is an Emma retelling. It's an adult Pakistani romance with childhood friends to lovers and the most beautiful love confessions ever. This one is set in Long Island and follows our main character Humaira. She has a perfect matchmaking track record and now she's ready to employ her unique skills to the gorgeous Charisma Ali in her community, but is forced to endure the disapproval of family friend Fawad's Sheikh. So if you've read Emma, you can kind of guess that Humaira and Fawad are our Emma and Mr. Knightley. I mentioned how this book has incredible love confessions, and I just want to read y'all a snippet. So we have Fawad saying, "Tell me, Humaira, is there no chance for me? Not make speeches. If I loved you less, I might be able to talk about it more. You know what I am. I have lectured you and scolded you. But you understand? You understand my feelings?" "Humaira," he says, "I love you." "You can't," I whisper. He shakes his head. "Do you enjoy making fools out of perfectly reasonable men?" "I do, yes," she snaps. "I don't mind, Humaira," he says, coming close. "Beloved Humaira, I will be a fool for you 1,000 times over." It was like the perfect amount of angst and tension and drama. It was so great. I highly recommend. Now for number 6 for romance, we actually have our first YA romance. I say first, but I think this might actually be the only YA romance that I gave 5 stars. It is Love Off the Record by Samantha Markham. This is an academic rivals to lovers book set in college. If there's one thing you should know about me, it's that academic rivals to lovers is my favorite young adult romance trope. So I am not at all surprised that this is one of my top reads of the year. Our 2 leads are freshman staffers at their university newspaper, and so they often compete for top stories and positions. You can see from my tabs how much I loved it. There was so much banter and chemistry between our 2 main characters. The tension between the 2 of them was so good. This book also has the trope of when the academic rivals, or just like rivals in general, start off by calling each other by their last name, and then it slowly progresses to like their first name, and then even a nickname or a special term of endearment that they only use for each other. For number 5, we're going back to a Desi romance for a second. We have Marriage and Must Be by Nisha Sharma. You can tell how beat up this ARC copy is, but it's so well loved. I really enjoyed this book. This is the incredible conclusion to the If Shakespeare Was an Auntie series. I love all of these characters so much. Karina, Prem, Bobby Bunty, and now Deepak and Veera. I'm gonna miss all of them and their antics. I feel like this trilogy is by far one of the best Desi rom-com series to exist. Once again, look at all of my tabs. There were so many incredible comedic and steamy and romantic moments. Here's some more art for all of you guys who love Deepak and Veera as much as I do. Then at number 4 for romance, we have The Ex-Vows by Jessica Joyce. I really liked You with a View, which was Jessica's debut. Her writing style perfectly hits my brain. I'd honestly say that this book was the second chance romance book of 2024. Georgia and Eli were so adorable. I loved all their moments together, especially with their friends. The themes of friendship and found family in this book were so beautifully written. Once again, here are all my tabs. There were so many good reveals and comedic moments and just like moments that tugged on my heartstrings, even if it wasn't necessarily about the romance. But yeah, very excited for Jessica to come back with more romances. I am eagerly waiting. Coming in at number 3, we have Next to You by Hannah Bonham Young. This is a book that made me sob so hard. I spent 2024 reading through Hannah's backlist. While I loved every single one of them, this book stood out to me so much, and I don't really know why, because it's friends to lovers, and I am not usually a friends to lovers gal, but this book discusses grief as well as mental health, and I feel like that is what struck me the most. There's something so special about falling in love with someone who pays such close attention to you and your needs. I loved Matt and Lane. I loved the way that Matt supported Lane throughout this book, and the way that he cared and loved her even when they weren't officially together and they were just friends. So yeah, not typically a friends to lovers gal, but this book really got me. Okay, and now we're in our top 2 for romance, and it's actually really funny because my top 2 romance books were not contemporary romance books, but in fact historical romance books. Another reason why historical romance remains the tried and true starting genre of romance. I feel like contemporary romance books and its tropes would not exist if it were not for historical romance books, so I better not see anyone putting down historical romance. Anyways, at number 2 we have the one and only Indigo by Beverly Jenkins. I read all of Beverly's adult historical romance books in 2024. It was like my mission to get through them so that I could meet her at StimulatCon, which I did, and it was so magical, and there is a whole backstory to this book and my experience at StimulatCon with Beverly that I will get into in a second. But yes, after reading all of her adult historicals, I feel like Indigo was the standout for me. Galen, our MMC, has the most beautiful lines coming out of his mouth that had me blushing all the way to my toes. It is so romantic, so sultry. The setting and the historical backdrop is incredible, as it is always in Beverly's books. This is a classic, so truly if you haven't read it yet, what are you doing? And now going into that story I was mentioning earlier, Essentially, I got this copy to get signed by Beverly at Steamy Lit, and I was so excited to meet her after reading all of her books. And at Steamy Lit Con, there's 2 days of signings on Friday and on Saturday, and so I decided to save her signing for Saturday. So Friday night, I'm like taking out the books that I already got signed during the Friday signing session and making sure that I have all the Saturday books in my cart ready to go. As I'm doing that, I realize I'm missing this copy. I can't find it anywhere. It's not in my suitcase, not in my backpack, not in the book cart that I was taking around with me on Friday, and I'm freaking out because this is like the original cover of the book. It's out of print. You can't really find it anywhere unless you're buying it from a reseller. And I was so devastated that I managed to get a copy of this book. I brought it all the way with me to Anaheim to get it signed by her, and I couldn't find it anywhere. It's like 11 p.m. at night, the night before the signing. I told my friends, everyone else is freaking out with me. My like worst fear is that someone found it and that they decided to keep it for themselves because it is pretty valuable. And I frantically posted in the Steamy Lit like Facebook group asking if anyone had seen it, and no one really responded because it was 11 p.m. at night, and so I was just like forced to go to sleep, but I was truly so upset. The next morning I wake up and someone has commented on the post saying that they found it because it fell out of my book cart in the middle of the signing ballroom, and they returned it to Beverly Jenkins' table, so she probably has it. I was so happy and relieved. Like truly, I don't think I have ever been more relieved in my life. Later that day of the signing, I ran to their table. I asked the volunteers like, have you seen this copy of like Indigo? Also, I should preface this by saying Friday afternoon, before I realized the book was missing, I got to go to this Avon like happy hour social with a bunch of other Avon authors, and Beverly is an Avon author, and so she was there, and I got to like meet her and say hi and just like tell her how much I loved her books. She has such a pure soul. She was so sweet. She's like a legend. Like so many people have come up to her and like said so many incredible things about her books. And then I went back to my room and realized like the book was missing. The volunteer says like, yes, they have the book. Once Beverly has like a break in her signing, they'll go and ask her about it. And so I'm like waiting off to the side and Beverly is there, and the volunteer goes up to her and like explains the situation, and Beverly like looks over at me and she like smiles. She reaches down to get her handbag and she pulls the book out of her handbag and is like, I was like so confused why someone left their original copy of Indigo like lying on the floor, but we're so glad like someone turned it in. She meant that at that Avon happy hour special, she had it with her the entire time while I was talking to her. I just didn't know the book was missing at that point. And she's like, make sure you keep track of your books and like take better care of them. And I was like, I'm so sorry. I promise I will never let this book out of my sight anymore. She was super sweet. She ended up signing the book saying, "For Yushi, glad we found you." So that is really special, and I'm glad that I have this special story attached to this book that I love, even if it did cause a bit of a heart attack for me. And then lastly, at number 1 for romance in 2024, we have A Tropical Rebel Against the Duke by Adriana Herrera. This is also a book that I don't own a copy of because it comes out in February, but I did read the arc in 2024, so I'm counting it. I cannot wait to get my hands on this book. It is truly one of the best historical romances I have ever read. I loved A Caribbean Heiress in Paris, which is the first book in this series, and I got to see snippets of Aurora and Apollo, who are the main characters in A Tropical Rebel, but I did not expect to love them as much as I did. This book exceeded all of my expectations. Aurora and Apollo were pure fire together. Their banter, humor, and wit was so incredibly well written. I even remember thinking to myself multiple times while reading this, now this is a romance. I loved every minute of it. The subplot too of Aurora taking on this role of helping women with their reproductive health, and there really wasn't much access to reproductive health and other resources for women at this time, was so incredibly well written and thoughtfully discussed. Just like watching her bring freedom to the women around her and Apollo helping it as much as he could. It was amazing. I can't wait to get a physical copy. I can't wait for everyone to read this in February. I truly have not stopped thinking about this book since I read it. And yes, if you haven't read the Les Leona series to begin with, definitely check it out. A Caribbean Heiress in Paris, An Island Princess Starts a Scandal, and A Tropical Rebel Gets a Duke. They're all so good, so well written. Cannot recommend it enough, especially if you love historical romance. Okay, now that we've completed our top 10 romances of the year, we're actually going to pivot over to a thriller series that had me in a chokehold in 2024, and that is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. I know this is a book community classic. Everyone has read this book. I am so behind. I only got to it this year. I understand why everyone is obsessed with Pip and Robbie, but for me, the books that I enjoyed the most were Good Girl, Bad Blood, and As Good as Dead. I read the print version of Good Girl, Bad Blood, and then I listened to the audio of As Good as Dead. The twist in both of these books had me on the edge of my seat, especially As Good as Dead. Like, I was so hooked on the audio. Pip is my girl. This girl could do no wrong. I feel like the reason why I enjoyed these two the most instead of book one is because we get to see Pip and her friends take on a larger role in the story, and of course Robbie as well. I love seeing all the romantic tidbits intertwined with the mystery. So yeah, these two are the standouts for me. I'm very excited to see how the TV show produces both of these books. And then the one and only nonfiction book that I read in 2024 that I gave 5-star reads was Sorry for the Inconvenience by Farah Nazrishi. This is a memoir about Farah's life, and it discusses so many themes that I could deeply relate to as the eldest daughter in a South Asian household. Farah's writing is raw and unflinchingly honest as they discuss some of the most heart-wrenching events that have happened in her life. I genuinely feel very honored to read this memoir and learn more about their life story. I heard that the audiobook is narrated by Farah, so I definitely want to go back and listen to some of the parts that stood out to me in this book the most. But in general, being able to learn about this story through Farah's voice was an unforgettable experience. Okay, now we're gonna move on to fantasy. We have 8 5-star fantasy reads this year, but first I want to shout out to honorable mentions. First we have Phantasma by Kaylee Smith. You've probably heard a lot about this book, but if you haven't, it's a dark romantic fantasy. If I remember correctly, it's set in historical New Orleans in Louisiana. It basically follows this girl Ophelia whose sister Genevieve goes missing. She finds out that her sister entered this deadly competition called Phantasma, and it's basically a series of trials set at this haunted mansion, and one person who completes all trials successfully becomes the winner of Phantasma, and the grand prize is that they're granted a single wish. So Ophelia enters Phantasma to go after her sister and rescue her, but she has to complete all these trials, and so she gets the help of this mysterious stranger named Blackwell, who arranges this bargain with her to help her out through the trials in exchange for 10 years of her life. I loved how protective Blackwell was in this book. Ophelia has OCD, and throughout the book Blackwell was so supportive of helping her through her compulsions. I feel like this is also another example of a man who is so pathetic and down bad for the FMC. I really felt like he was on his knees for Ophelia the entire time. I think the only reason that I didn't consider this a 5-star read is that the ending was a little bit predictable, but other than that, I had so much fun reading this. I'm so excited for Enchantra, and there are like 2 other books in this series, which is super exciting. Can't wait for all of them. I've read Kaylee's YA books and they were kind of a miss for me, so I'm very excited for these adult books she's releasing. My other honorable mention was The Dangerous Ones by Lauren Blackwood. This is a Black-authored YA vampire fantasy romance set in the Civil War. You basically have the Confederates, who are all evil vampires, and then the Union are all humans. And then our FMC is this young black girl named Jerusalem who has special powers and fights with the Union. And while she's fighting alongside the Union, she's also seeking revenge on her family that were all enslaved and some were killed by this one vampire. On one of her missions with the Union Army, she is forced to work with another member named Alexei, who happens to be a vampire from Russia. He's one of the only vampires that fights with the Union. And when I tell you that this man is so down bad for Jerusalem, I mean it. The book basically opens up with them having known each other for a while and having gone on missions together in the past. So you already have this established relationship with them, and in Jerusalem's point of view, she's just like an angry, fierce girl who's really trying to fight for her family and her people. And then when you switch over to Alexei's point of view, he's just like, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, Jerusalem. Like, that's all he thinks about, and all he wants to do is protect her and make sure that she's okay. And it's just like, ugh, I loved it. All these tabs that you see here are literally scenes of him being pathetically in love with her. There was this TikTok of this person who was like, I need yearning in books. Where did all the yearning in books go? This is the book right here for you. I was also so obsessed with this book that I ended up getting a special edition. That's going to be a theme of these next several books. For all of my top fantasy reads, I went and I got special editions of them because I just love them so much. That's how you know I love a book, if I'm willing to spend extra money on a special edition. Got the special edition from Fate Crate, and this is Jerusalem and Alexei on the cover. They look so badass. There's also a wolf on the edges because Alexei is known as like the White Wolf. That's his name among the Union. And then there's more art of the 2 of them. Ugh, I love them. And then this is the naked hardcover. It's so gorgeous. the backside it says vengeance will be had. And for this book specifically, the only reason that I didn't rate it 5 stars is because some of the language feels a little too modern to be set during the Civil War. I think especially in a lot of the casual dialogue and slang that the characters use when they're talking to each other. Sometimes some of the vocabulary words they use makes me think like, did this word even exist back in the 1800s? I don't know. But other than that, I really loved it. And then moving on to some of the 5-star fantasy reads, coming at number 8 we have The God and the Gumiho by Sophie Kim. Sophie Kim is one of my top fantasy authors. This is her adult fantasy debut. It's perfect for my K-drama fans. I feel like the playful banter combined with like the romance and then also the mystery subplot was really fun to read. The ending was so bittersweet and left me so shocked. I was so sad to let these characters go, but I have a feeling we'll be hearing from them again soon. I also got this art print of the two of them, and you can already tell how grumpy Syuka looks and how much Honey just like bothers him. And of course, I had to get a special edition of this book as well. Look how stunning. I'm obsessed. I love these colors, and the art again is just like so perfect for their dynamic. Ugh, I love them so much. They're so cute. The next book we have is An Honored Vow by Melissa Blair. This is the last book in the Halfling Saga series. It literally just came out, but I was lucky enough to read an arc. The series is 4 books long. It essentially follows this world of elves and fae and humans and halflings. It really touches on the themes of being indigenous and dealing with colonization and war. Kira, our main character, is such a fierce fighter. I was so moved by her journey throughout the series, but especially in this book. This book in particular really dealt with the atrocities of colonization and war. It was really sad to see the sacrifices that Kira and her family and her friends had to make in order to liberate their people. I would say that the writing, the politics, the characters, etc. in the series is really smart. I don't know how else to put it, but I just feel like if you're an epic fantasy reader and you really like reading fantasies by like legendary fantasy authors, you know, the ones I'm talking about, you will love this series. All of the plot twists, all of the character choices, everything just like falls together so perfectly in this book. Really proud of Melissa for publishing her first debut fantasy series. You are a fantasy lover, you must pick up the series. The first book is A Broken Blade. Next up we have We Shall Be Monsters by Tara Sim. I've talked about this book so many times on both my pages, but I have to shout it out again because it is truly that good. We Shall Be Monsters is a Frankenstein reimagining with Desi mythology. I would categorize this as a fantasy horror book. So creative. The world building, which includes both South Asian cultural and then also religious aspect, is incredible and probably the reason why I love this book so much. The book essentially follows our main character Gajul, who has a sister named Lesia who has just died, and Gajul can't imagine a life without Lesia, so she prepares Lesia's body for resurrection. But instead, her sister warps into this ghost-like creature called a Bhuta. Lesia starts going on this murderous rampage as a Bhuta, killing anyone who has ever wronged her. Gajul gets sentenced to death for her rampage. While she's in prison, these two strangers who turn out to be rebels offer her a deal to free her, but the catch is that she has to resurrect the kingdom's fallen crown prince in order to usurp the current king on the throne and start this growing rebellion led by the prince. They also promise that they'll take her to her sister's body. Kajal doesn't really care about the other end of the deal. She really just wants to save her sister, so she accepts and she goes with them to resurrect this crown prince. But she finds out that the boy she ends up resurrecting is not the crown prince, but this whole other boy altogether. So now she has to team up with this mysterious boy to find the real crown prince and also save her sister's soul before it's too late. There is also a slow burn romantic subplot in this book, which we were given crumbs, but I took them. Very excited for book 2. I cannot wait to see where the story goes. Again, I just love the research and care that was put into this world and its magic system, so can't wait for the next one. Okay, I had to take a little break because my camera battery was really rude and decided to die on me, so here we are several hours later, fully charged with different lighting. But let's jump into number 5, Wrath of the Talon, also by Sophie Kim. This is the second book in Sophie's YA trilogy, also based on Korean mythology. It follows an assassin named Shinlina and a Dokkaebi emperor named Hanul-Rui. This is the second book, so it picks up where we left off in book 1. Book 1 was very much a fun knife to throw enemies to lovers, but book 2 destroyed me. I just felt my heart dropping further and further into my stomach with each page that I read. The romance broke me, the other parts of the plot broke me. I cannot wait to see how everything ends in the last book, Reign of the Talon. I actually just started it today. Here she is. I'm so nervous. This comes out in February. But yeah, truly the series has changed my life. I am so obsessed with it. I love all of Sophie's works, but to me the series is my favorite. It's the one that introduced me to her. Then at number 4 we have Garden of the Cursed by Katie Rosepool. This was another surprise 5-star read for me. I only picked up this duology because Katie was coming to a book signing in my area with Tara Sim, and oh my god, it was so good. It was not at all what I was expecting. I had the time of my life reading this duology. I feel like the setting reminded me a lot of Ketterdam from Six of Crows. It's super cool and very gritty. You also have the high society drama from Bridgerton combined with this like teen spunky mystery like Veronica Mars. I cannot stress enough how perfect this duology is for fans of Logan and Veronica from Veronica Mars. The romance is excellent. It's second chance. It's kind of like childhood friends who became something more and then became estranged and then now are forced to reconcile again. Our main character Marlowe is a curse breaker, so she takes on clients who think they have curses placed on them, and then she helps track down who the culprit was and breaks the curse. And she's really well known in her town. A lot of people come to her for help, and then her childhood friend Adrius comes and asks her to help him break a life-threatening curse. And he comes from this like really affluent family. He thinks it's someone close to him who put the curse on him, so in order to track down who it is, they pretend to be in a very public relationship, and all of the fake dating shenanigans were so fun. Yeah, I cannot recommend this duology enough. I also got special editions of it. These are the Owl Crate editions and they are so gorgeous. I'm obsessed with the end papers. They have Adrius and Marlowe. This is them dancing at one of the balls where they're pretending to be together. And then this is the second book, Masquerade of the Heart, which I also really like, but I think the first one was just really special for me because I discovered the duology. Here's some more end paper art of them sneaking off to another room during a ball. Anyways, I love that series so much. I'm so glad I discovered it last year. Okay, now we're going into our top 3, which was so hard to rank because I truly enjoyed these so much. If I could put these all on an equal pedestal, I would. But at number 3, we have Immortal by Sealin Tan. This is the finished copy. It's very shiny, sprayed edges, very pretty. You can see all of my tabs, which are all the moments that I love. I've been a fan of Sealin Tan since forever. If you've been on my page for a really long time, I've been screaming about her books for years. So there is no surprise that I loved Immortal. It's so romantic and dreamy like all of her other books. It's set in the world of the Celestial Kingdom but takes place in a different realm, and I feel like especially for a standalone novel this did a really good job of expanding this world, introducing new characters, new politics, and of course building an incredible romance. Honestly, I would say that the romance is a little bit more amped up in this book. Like the majority of these tabs are just like the most romantic, dreamy lines that come out of the God of War's mouth. Anyways, I will devour anything she writes and I hope you will too. I know she has a new YA fantasy coming out. Very excited to read that. Then at number 2 we have A Monsoon Rising by Thea Guanzum. This is the sequel to The Hurricane Wars, which is very quickly becoming a favorite fantasy series of mine. The romance in A Monsoon Rising had me in a chokehold the entire book. I was frothing at the mouth at how juicy all these moments between Alaric and Taliesin were. The banter and the chemistry was crazy and truly reminded me of why I love Marriage of Convenience in fantasy so much. If you haven't heard of The Hurricane Wars, it's this epic Filipino-inspired fantasy. It's either originally Raylo fanfiction or it's inspired by Raylo, but I'm pretty sure it's the former. You definitely see the Raylo themes in the book, but I feel like most of the time I'm able to block it out, and I feel like with this trad pub version, a lot of the Filipino elements are much more prominent and kind of take away from the whole like Raylo dynamic and like Star Wars world. This book also ends on a huge cliffhanger, and I have no idea when we're getting book 3, so I might just have to go back and reread this in order to pass the time. This is also a like limited print run deluxe edition. Absolutely stunning. And then without further ado, last but not least, my top fantasy book of 2024, Air by Sabaa Tahir. I don't even know if I can describe how much I loved this book. If you haven't heard of Air, it is the first book in a new duology set in the same world as the Ember and the Ashes series. And Ember and the Ashes, it's a 4-book series. It's Sabaa Tahir's first fantasy series. Super beloved, such a classic. Highly recommend reading it. It will destroy you, but it's worth it. This book is set 20 years later and follows a new set of characters. I don't really want to spoil the connection between the set of the characters in the first books and then this book, but I'll say our main character Quill is now the crown prince of the Martial Empire, and then we have 2 other characters, Saoirse, who is a tracker, and then Aiz, who is fighting for the liberation of her people. You get to see how their paths cross and the way that they do and the way that Sabaa writes these paths. I wish I could relive reading this book for the first time because I was truly so shocked at some of the twists and turns that are revealed. My reading experience for this book is probably one of my favorite reading experiences ever, and I do think that's probably why this book ended up being my favorite. A bunch of my friends and I got together and read our arcs over the summer, and it was like the best thing ever. We were on FaceTime together, exchanging theories and reacting in live time to all the crazy scenes that we were reading. It was truly so magical coming back to this world years later and meeting these characters that you've loved and known for so long, still falling in love with a new set of characters and a new story. In my opinion, Subhathahir is one of this generation's best writers. You can see all of my tabs here again that are just moments that had me screaming, crying, throwing up. Once again, I have no idea when we're getting book 2, so I might also have to reread this to pass the time. And yes, I absolutely did get a special edition of this book as well. I also have the Walmart edition in the back here somewhere, but I had to get this stunning edition as well. The end papers are so gorgeous. That's Quill and Saoirse right there. I love them so much. Easily my favorite characters. Although Sufyan, who is Quill's best friend in this book, this guy right here, has a very soft spot in my heart. This edition also came with overlays, which are absolutely stunning as well. I want to show you one. Here it is. Look at it. Oh my gosh. I'm dying looking at it again. I also forgot to mention that the romance in this book is absolutely incredible, just like in all of Subha's books. This book also features a marriage of convenience, although I will say it's more like a fake marriage of convenience. And those were all of my top reads of 2024. Thank you so much for sitting with me and going through them all. I actually had a lot of fun reminiscing on all these books, and now I low-key want to reread some of them. I'm also really excited that this was, again, my first YouTube video. I'm super excited to be here. Let me know if there's any content in particular you want to see from me. If you also read any of these in 2024, let me know how you liked some of these books. I cannot wait to start posting more videos on here. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.